Welcome to the Sencode lesson titled Threat, Vulnerability and Risk. For a business to be successful, it's vital that its managers recognise any potential pitfalls that could adversely affect it in the future and plan if necessary or prudent to do so. Ultimately, it all comes down to calculating whether certain risks are great enough to warrant taking action, and this is why having a good understanding of the relationship between vulnerabilities, threats and risks that the organisation may face is critical for business continuity. The purpose of this lesson is to give you a good understanding of what threats, vulnerabilities and risks are and how they interact so that you can calculate the best course of action to take to limit any negative impacts on your business. We'll begin by defining each one, visualising their relationship and how they influence components within an organisation as well as each other before learning how to calculate and mitigate risk. Finally, we'll look at what a threat actor might consider when choosing a target and why you need to have a good risk mitigation plan to protect your organisation against cybercrime. So in the context of cybersecurity, threats are defined as any event that could compromise the ability of a computer system, service or network. Threats are not always obvious, and it's really important to remember them as actual events rather than people or things. These may be referred to as threat actors and are usually the origin or creator of the threats. It's crucial in today's world for people to protect their sensitive and private information from unauthorized access. Protecting confidentiality is dependent on being able to define and enforce certain access levels for information. In some cases, doing this involves separating information into various collections that are then organized by who needs access to the information and how sensitive that information actually is, i.e. the amount of damage suffered if the confidentiality was breached. Some of the most common means used to manage confidentiality include access control lists, volume and file encryption, and Unix file permissions. Data integrity is what the I in the CIA Triad stands for. This is an essential component of the CIA Triad, and it's designed to protect data from deletion or modification from unauthorized parties. It also ensures that when an authorized person makes a change that shouldn't have been made, the damage can be reversed. Availability is the final component of the CIA Triad, and it refers to the actual availability of your data. Authentication mechanisms, access channels and systems all have to work properly for the information they protect and ensure it's available whenever it's needed. High availability systems are computing resources that have architectures that are specifically designed to improve availability. Based on the specific high availability or HA system design, this may target hardware failures, upgrades or power outages to help improve availability, or it may manage several network connections to route around various network outages. Types of threats can be broken down into three categories. Natural threats such as floods, hurricanes or lightning are acts of nature and can be unpredictable in terms of onset, duration and impact. Unintentional threats are attributed to human error. These can be physical, so leaving a server room door unlocked for example, or digital by way of not updating software or using weak passwords. Intentional threats are deliberate human acts to compromise the security of data on a system by gaining unauthorized access. Threat actors is a term used to describe the hackers who threaten the assets of an organization. They vary in skill set and motivation and usually fall into the following categories. Firstly, we've got script kiddies, and although this sounds like slang, it's actually a genuine designation given to hackers who are just getting started out. They're usually younger and unskilled, and they tend to favour using other people's code and hard work to simply make things happen for them, usually without understanding what the consequences are of what they're doing. Criminal is a term that we're all familiar with, and in the context of cyber, usually refers to black hats, hackers that are trying to make ill-gotten gains from exploiting vulnerable systems. Competitors refers to hackers who've perhaps been drafted for the purpose of committing corporate espionage to gain a competitive business advantage over competing businesses. APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threats and are usually state-sponsored. This is when a government mobilises a hacking task force to disrupt the operation of another state's infrastructure. Russia and China are particularly well reputed for this kind of nefarious socio-economic behaviour. Hacktivists are threat actors that usually have a political agenda and they use their hacking skills to carry out their activism. Probably most famous for this is the hacktivist group Anonymous. Terrorists again may have a political agenda but use their skills to create fear, cause deaths and force their targets into taking action. The insider is a growing threat, particularly since the pandemic, as workforces have become decentralised and had to work remotely. Disgruntled members of staff have been known to take illegal action against their employers by hacking and gaining unauthorised access. The term insider, however, can refer to any of the threat actors in this list and is a real concern due to its insidious nature and how difficult they are to identify. If we take a look at this table showing threat sources, we can see how threats can present themselves. We can see potential sources, so internal or external hackers, terrorists, and employee error in the first column. In the middle column is a list of the possible motivations they may have and the actual threats themselves in the column on the right. So external hackers may be motivated simply by the challenge of compromising a network. They may be doing it for status or reputational benefits or as part of a game to compete with other hackers. The threats that this kind of behaviour and motivation can produce include the system being hacked, staff being manipulated through social engineering attacks, and criminals rummaging through bins to find sensitive information that might not have been disposed of properly. Internal hackers may be motivated by being unhappy with the company that they work for and set up system backdoors, commit fraud, or generally just do a poor job deliberately. Terrorists may attack systems using malicious hacking techniques and malware for personal or political reasons, and the threat of unauthorized access, ransomware, and data corruption could be the symptoms of poorly trained employees who make a number of different mistakes. Moving on to vulnerabilities, a security vulnerability is a flaw that can be in an IT system, application, policy, or procedure. Anything that leaves an organization open to cyber attack. Vulnerabilities can also be either intentional, unintentional, or in some cases automated. For example, when hackers use bots. They could include outdated software or a lack of software altogether, or even a simple physical vulnerability such as a door that's being left wide open. Within the context of IT security, vulnerabilities are known weaknesses. Therefore, knowing the factors that impact your vulnerability will help you better understand your cybersecurity posture. That's to say, the overall state and strength of your cybersecurity efforts. Risk is defined as a potential loss or harm related to technical infrastructure or the use of technology within an organisation, and it's calculated in a very specific way. There are three variables that we need to consider. There's the annual rate of occurrence, or ARO, and this is how often an event takes place within the space of a year. The single loss expectancy, or SLE, what it will cost the business in a single occurrence of that taking place. And the annual loss expectancy, or ALE, how much of a loss there'll be from this event occurring over the course of the year. So if we have a look at this illustration, it should help you to understand the relationship between threat, vulnerability, and risk. If we imagine a tightrope walker trying to safely cross the crocodile-infested waters below, you can see how that, in this example, the tightrope walker's imbalance is his vulnerability or weakness. The old crocodile sat waiting hopefully underneath is of course the threat. And the risk here is the possibility that our wobbly tightrope walker might fall off the rope and end up as lunch. If we extend this representation a little further, the tightrope walker could be company assets, the crocodile could be a malicious hacker, and the risk could be a staff member opening a malicious email that the hacker has sent with the intention of compromising those assets. When calculating risk, it's really important to understand the relationship between threats and vulnerabilities and also how they interact within the context of an organisation. And this flow diagram illustrates this really well. If we start with the threats at the top left, it shows that they increase risk and exploit vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities in turn increase risk and expose information assets, which in turn then have asset values which again increase risk. Risk indicates protection requirements which need to be met by the implementation of controls, and controls are put in place to both protect against threats and reduce risk. The calculation itself is a straightforward one, and it involves multiplying the annual rate of occurrence with a single loss expectancy to find out the annual loss expectancy and determine what needs to be done, if anything, to implement controls and mitigate the risk. To give an example, if the ARO of interruption due to flooding is a 50-50 chance, and the cost of this happening each time is £1 million, then the budget for dealing with this issue is calculated to be £500,000. A good system for mitigating risk is the implementation of a Security Information and Event Management System, or SIEM. And as tackling cyber risks becomes increasingly critical, SIEM is a powerful framework for identifying assets, their vulnerabilities, and the threats that they face, and how to manage and record them as events to create the necessary controls needed to mitigate risk and ensure business continuity. A cybercriminal will calculate risk too, and understand that certain risks might be considered too minor to put risk controls in place. This grey area and identifying these small chinks in the armour are what bad actors will strive to do so that they may be exploited. They'll target the areas perceived to be lower risk and attempt to operate under the radar, so to speak. So just to summarise, the goal of this lesson is to help you understand what threats, vulnerabilities and the risks that they create to business are, and how they interact and the relationship, how to effectively mitigate risk, and the importance of having a security information and event management system in place to protect your business continuity. That's it for this one. I'll see you in the next video.